Under the Japanese occupation during much of World War II, the doctrine of Asia for the Asiatics was spread across Eastern and Southern Asia. During this period, the people of many Asiatic lands had their thirst for independence whetted. That yearning for freedom was seized upon by the opportunistic Japanese leaders in their campaign to stimulate the people to hatred of the Allies. With the end of World War II, the stirrings of nationalism flared into eruption throughout most of Southern and Eastern Asia. In the spring of 1945, American and Australian bombers opened up on Borneo, the largest island in the invaluable Dutch East Indies. Borneo, strategically located between Malaya and Australia, was an important invasion target. Allied warships performed their familiar prelude to invasion. Australian soldiers went ashore at several points on the large island and drove inland against spirited resistance. Tank infantry teams made rapid progress. On June 10th, General MacArthur landed on Labuan Island off British North Borneo and congratulated the Australians on a job well done. Japanese domination over the peoples of Asia was nearing an end. With the end of World War II, the islands of the East Indies, which had been ruled by the Dutch before the war, became the new independent nation of Indonesia in the eyes of the people of those islands. In Yogyakarta, Java, Ahmed Sukarno, the native leader during the Japanese occupation, and a group of associates, proclaimed the independence of the Isles of the Indies. The nationalists consolidated their position quickly. Everyone available was enlisted to work in the common cause, the setting up of a functioning government strong enough to withstand any attacks upon it by the Allied forces scheduled soon to arrive. The nationalists were determined to stand their ground. In December 1945, the first Dutch troops arrived in the Indies, 4 months after Japan's surrender. The Dutch Marines were assigned to take over the job of keeping order and restoring the islands to Dutch rule, a job which had been performed by British troops until the arrival of the Dutch Queen's forces. The men went right to work in an attempt to quell the insurgents' rebellion. At Cirebon, on the island of Java, Dutch and Indonesian leaders effected a partial compromise of differences and a ceasefire in the Linggadjati Agreement. But that condition did not last long. Dutch troops moved into territory acknowledged to be Republican by the terms of the agreement. The Dutch police action resulted in a renewal of violence. A settlement of differences between the Dutch and Indonesians seemed more remote than ever. Bridges were destroyed by the retreating natives. The Indonesians ravaged their own land rather than have it prove useful to the Dutch. In mid-1947, the United Nations attempted mediation. Australia's delegate, William Hodgson, called for an immediate cessation of hostilities and peaceful arbitration. But the issue was far from being settled. The communists in Indonesia, who had been supporting the nationalists in their fight for independence, rebelled. The The Republican troops went to work quickly, rounding up every communist they could locate. The uprising was ineptly stayed, and within a month it was decisively crushed by the Indonesian Republican forces. With its leaders either captured or killed, the communist force collapsed, and the threat to the success of the nationalist cause ended. In December 1949, the islands of the Indies officially became the Republic of the United States of Indonesia. Elected president by the 16 Negaras of the Federation of Indonesian States, Sukarno was sworn in a ceremony at Yogyakarta. The new ruler, who had collaborated with the Japanese, had been striving toward this day for some 30 years. Finally, after 4 years of fighting and negotiating, he and his people were officially recognized as an independent nation. In Indonesia, as elsewhere in Asia, colonialism was dying.